Attention.
Registration is now open for the Middle States Commission on Higher Education 2024 Annual Conference, Protecting the Future, Champions for Higher Education, December 11th through 13th, 2024 in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. Don't miss out. Register today at msche.org/annual-conference or head to msche.org and click on the conference link. I'll see you there. I cannot believe that we're already in the back half of 2024.
Are you kidding me?
But here we are. Before you know it, the calendar will be turning again, and that means we are already getting ready for 2025 conferences, and one that I'm personally very excited to attend again is the Insights EDU Conference. If you care at all about growing enrollment and building a student-centered higher ed experience, you really should be at this conference. Registration is now open, so secure your spot while early bird pricing is still available. Visit insightsedu.com for more information and to register. That's visit insightsedu.com for more information and to register.
Hey everybody, this is Elvin Freitas, co-founder of the EdUp Experience, and today we are extremely excited to announce our paid subscription service. By subscribing today, you will get exclusive early access to ad-free episodes, extended episodes, bonus episodes, original content. That's right, original content, and invites to special events, all while helping to sustain EdUp. To become a subscriber, go to edupexperience.com. That's EDUP experience.com and subscribe to our free email newsletter to learn how you can get access. Again, go to edupexperience.com. That's EDUP experience.com.
Welcome back, everybody. It's your time to Ed Up on the EdUp Experience podcast, where we make education your business. This is Dr. Joe Soule back with you on another episode, and I want to quickly remind people, you may have seen it on LinkedIn or on our weekly newsletter or on my weekly LinkedIn newsletter or our weekly email that we do or all of the LinkedIn posts that we do. But we have started EdUp Editorials. EdUp Editorials is I just talked to so many people, and I know that they have stuff written probably on their computer somewhere, and they go, oh, I couldn't get it published. Nobody was interested. I'm interested. Elvin's interested. We want to publish your content, and we're going to put it on EdUp Editorials, which is the publishing part of our website, the EdUp Experience, edupexperience.com. So if you've got something to say, you have an opinion, you have an article that you've written, you want to write an article, we want it. We want to publish it, and we want to give you the ability to share that out to your audiences, and we'll share it to ours. And that's because we think there's untold stories in higher education. We think people are not writing as much as they could write because there seems to be, I don't know if I want to call it a monopoly, but there's only so many places you can go to get your information out there. And we want to provide another way or another pathway to get that done. So I can't even say my own business name, EdUp Editorials on our website. Check it out. Write something, submit it. You could submit to edupexperience.com. I think I've got that all right. If not, just send it to me on LinkedIn and we'll figure it out. But I want to get to our episode today because we have to talk all things enrollment and admissions. And when that happens, you know how excited I get because that's has been my world for 20 years. And I have I would say a heavy hitter, like a heavyweight admissions person here. If you actually go and read her background, it's like, oh, she's a member of this and member of that and member of this, and she's on this policy, and it's literally amazing. And I'll hit my amazing button when appropriate. Ladies and gentlemen, let's get her to the mic. Her name is Whitney Soule. She is the Vice President and Dean of Admissions at the University of Pennsylvania. Whitney, welcome to an EdUp Mic. How are you?
I am great. And I should say I'm Vice Provost and Dean of Admissions.
Vice Provost. What did I say? Vice President? Well, I mean, it's almost the same thing, but Vice Provost, that's fine. How are you?
I'm doing great. Thank you for having me.
I have Vice Provost written here, but when you write VP, that's what happens. So tell us first about the University of Pennsylvania for somebody that has been living under a rock. Tell us about the university, where you are, what you do, how you do it, and we'll go from there.
Well, I could spend the entire podcast telling you just about the University of Pennsylvania a lot of people don't know that Penn was the first university in the United States. It was founded by Ben Franklin, and it is an urban institution, a private school in the city of Philadelphia. There are 12 schools that make up the University of Pennsylvania. 4 of them have undergraduate education, and those 4 schools are the School of Engineering, the Nursing School, Wharton School for Business, and the College of Arts and Science, which is a traditional liberal arts curriculum school. And so the 4 schools together, the undergraduate first year class is 2,400 students, and it distributes into each of those 4 schools.
1740 was, I think, the year. Could that be 1740?
Could be, yeah. I mean, it is the oldest university.
That's
long history.
I did not know that. I think maybe I knew that. It's kind of one of those facts that you think and then when you hear somebody say it, you go, whoa. It is the oldest university in the United States, huge, long history, and obviously is the vice provost and dean of admissions. You have one heck of a job to recruit, craft, ensure the student experience for those that are interested in UPenn. Can you talk about your job a little bit and its scope?
Sure. I will say this. I have a great job, and it's challenging because it is, reading tens of thousands of applications. We get about 65,000, a little over 65,000 applications from first year applicants to distribute into the 4 schools. And as I said, that's only 2,400 seats. So there's a lot of exactly. There's a lot of reading and evaluation to do to settle the class. But I was describing the work of admission to somebody not long ago, and I was talking about reading the applications and the kinds of answers we get to read and how we get to know students and their applications. And that person said to me, wow, it's like you read the future. And I thought, it really is. That is what our job is, because there are 2,400 first-year students who will come to Penn each fall, but we're reading the thoughts and aspirations of 65,000 young people who are intending to go into higher ed and eventually will become the people who lead us and solve big problems. So, in a broad lens, the work that we do is inviting students into a process to be evaluated, to continue in education, to take on a higher ed experience at University of Pennsylvania. They're articulating their interest in one of the 4 schools and describing to us their activities and their interests and their aspirations, so we can see how those things fit together. That's sort of the broadest view of what we do. And one of the aspects of the way that we do our work, a lot of news will report it as holistic review. I think of it as comprehensive review, which really means the same thing. But in addition to looking at the academic credentials that a student is putting forth for us to evaluate, we're also looking at who they are as people at that point in their lives, right? Like we're expecting them to present as teenagers, not full-grown adults. And so at this point in their lives, how do you, as a young person, organize your time around things that interest you? And how do you demonstrate exploring? How do you demonstrate committing to something? How do you demonstrate your interest in the views of other people and your contribution? And to get at that, we have to think really carefully about the questions that we'll ask.
I have so many questions for you. The first is I'm going to ask what I think would be a normal public question for somebody that didn't understand higher education, and have you respond to it. And it's really a why. Whitney, why only 2,400 students? If you have 65,000 applications, why can't you take 4,000 or 40,000? Like what are the implications on taking a bigger class to the university as a whole, and why you can't, somebody who's just walking by goes, well, you just take all 65,000 and you'd be fine, right? Like what are those implications that you have to think through if you go to 2,401 or 3,000 or 30,000?
It is a great question, and I'm glad you asked it, because I do think it's a really salient point at this point in time, where the admit rate is so low because of the size available. And so the easy question is the one that you're asking, which is just make more room.
Right.
And the truth is that the design of the education that Penn offers and provides is the direct in-person teaching and learning environment. Our students, our 12 schools are contiguous, so all of the entire university is sort of one large footprint in the university, in the city, I mean. And our students are taught in person by our faculty, and the experience of learning, not just being taught in person, but the working collaboratively with their peer group and using the campus as a resource and the city as a resource, that requires a physical footprint, and it requires, I mean, if you think about all of the things that is required space-wise and human resource-wise to have the classroom environment and size that you want, to limit it so that it can be interactive, and you want your first and second year students to be living on campus so they have that together, the dining hall space that you need, the classroom space, you start to roll out the practicality even of just accommodating another 100 students. That's a full dorm. Right. Or that's securing another 100 places for students to live adjacent in the city of Philadelphia, where housing is really tight. So even just in practical terms of space, expanding is a really big challenge that would take planning. And then when you think about the pedagogy of how the university wants to deliver its education, that has limitations that are hard to expand really quickly in the way that we provide education now.
Tell them like it is.
I think that's just to double down on that, and I've heard that a lot. It doesn't matter what kind of school you have. The schools are set up for a certain population number. If you have X buildings and those X buildings have Y capacity, that's how the capacity is. And if you go more than that capacity, you're going to trigger the fire marshal, who's right. I mean, there's practicalities that are involved. If you have dining halls that become oversaturated and people can't get food because the lines are too long. So there's all of these intricacies. Public safety. If you put another 100 people on campus and you have Z public safety members who are for this number of students, and you put another 100 or 1,000 on top of that, it becomes less safe. And then you have to, as a university, you have to decide, are we going to add fixed costs? And if you're going to add these fixed costs, and I'm not just talking about ancillary fixed costs, I'm talking about if you're going to remain 1 to 15, let's just say in your classroom student to faculty ratio, and you're going to take on 1,000 more students, well, that means X more faculty members. You can't just pick them out of thin air. You have to hire them in advance, well in advance of those students. So all of these things take cyclical planning. And so you have to stick to that number for that year. Now, you might next year decide, okay, we're going to go to 2,500 because we have capacity, or we built a new building, or so on and so on. But to say, well, we'll just take 100 more, that has some downstream effects that can be catastrophic in some, right? It can contribute to retention. So your class ends up a whole lot less than you thought it would. And I think that's just something that people don't typically think about. And that's for all institutional types, right?
I think that's true. And I think that one of the stressful parts of doing enrollment work is the concept of yield after admitting a group of students, trying to estimate how many of these students to whom we've offered admission will actually come. And it is art and science, like nobody knows exactly, but we have to be pretty good at it, because if we were to accidentally over-enroll by 100 students, that's not planned for. And so that becomes an emergency for all of the sort of capacity things we just discussed. But it also, when you're not ready for over-enrollment like that, and I think you were just touching on this, it impacts the student experience. When you make rooms that were supposed to be doubles into triples, or, you start stressing the environment for how it was designed, it does potentially really impact the student experience. And while it may impact retention from year to year, it it also puts a pressure on the work that we do in the subsequent years because we can't over-enroll again. So you can't add to that over-enrollment as it works its way through its 4 years. You might figure out how to manage that for that particular class, but then the pressure to make sure that doesn't happen again the next year creates another sort of calculus in the work that you do of how many students can we admit to enroll this next class. And the complexity in a place like Penn, where there's 4 schools, that there's the 2,400 students, but then there's also the discrete number of underclassmen in the first year class that would be going into each one of those 4 schools that we have to manage really carefully.
Yeah, and then obviously this is my opinion, and I wouldn't put words in your mouth. But then you over-enroll, and then you got to deal with faculty that have over-enrolled courses, and then they're not happy, and then that wouldn't happen to you, but it's happened to me. And it's like, well, we have to, everybody can't be happy all the time with everything. We have to do what's in the best interest of the students, but then the pressure starts to move itself. And, you're in a pressure-based position. I mean, you have to craft a class. You have to predict your yield, which is so hard. It's so hard. It's harder now, especially with FAFSA stuff and the craziness and the delays than it's ever been. But I think, and I want to go back to something you said, you talked about holistic and comprehensive review, I think is what you called it. And you said, we kind of want 18-year-olds to be 18. We want kids to be kids. But you know that parents are involved in this process. And we've seen overly involved parents, like when Varsity Blues took place, and we've seen maybe parents that aren't as involved. Can you talk a little bit about how, without revealing anything you don't want to reveal, but it seems to me that there's so much pressure sometimes on kids to get in, to get this.
You just made the list.
And parents can put so much pressure on kids. And we just want to know who they are, not who the parents craft them to be so that you could get a checkbox and make the list at Penn. That's got to put pressure on you too, to go, okay, what am I looking at here? Right?
It absolutely does. And I'm glad we're talking about this, because there is, in selective admissions, the environment in which I work, where the demand is really so much higher than the space that we have available, it does create a special kind of anxiety. And one of my true goals in the work that I do, in addition to doing very good work for the University of Pennsylvania and bringing in these classes of students who are really remarkable in so many ways, is to also try to minimize the anxiety of what this process means. And what's really challenging is that I'm often asked, well, if you had these 2 students who were exactly the same, and the only difference was fill in the blank. This student is an expert in this, and this student is more well-rounded, trying out a lot of things. Which student would you want? I want them both, because those are different contributions, and presumably that is an expression of how this student is enjoying living their lives and how they're motivated and applying themselves. And so there isn't one way to be. In fact, there are 65,000 applications. There's 65,000 ways to be in the world as an 18-year-old that we get to review. And I think that keeping in mind that there's a broad spectrum of intervention for applicants along the way, everything from students who are approaching their college application process with very little support, maybe no support at home, maybe no example at home of higher education. And so these students are really taking it on and looking for resources to help them, all the way through to students who have invested family members who are taking the time and have some exposure to higher ed, and in schools where there's a lot of a peer environment and adult environment that's talking about higher ed and preparing students. And it's the whole spectrum of everything in between. And so what it means for us as deans of admission and an admissions office promoting this kind of education is to make sure that the process that we design begins with an invitation to students into the college application process that is broad and that it's clear, this is what we value at Penn. This is where we're going to look for it in the application, and this is why it matters. So that it's not a secret.
Like just totally, yeah, it's like
right.
Not the person behind the curtain kind of thing, right?
Right. And so when we think about the questions that we're asking students to answer in an application, they're done with a lot of intention on our part. And it serves two things. The questions, quite obviously, are asked so that we can evaluate the answers for the things that are valuable to us in choosing students for Penn. But also the questions that we ask serve, and the way that we ask them, serve as a signal back out into the world about what Penn values. And that's helping students decide whether or not this is an environment that feels like it would align with them and what their values are. And so we don't have to have every person out in the world want to apply to Penn. We need students who would appreciate and thrive in this environment to know about it, to be able to apply into it, and for us to have created an environment in which a student, regardless of their resources and how much support they do have or don't have, has an equitable shot at presenting themselves fully for us to be able to evaluate them. And in talking about that in as many places and as many ways as I can, hope that we can start showing students that we are reading them as individuals, which gives them a little bit of room to put boundaries around how much intervention they'll allow into the application they're preparing.
Excellent.
Now, let me give you a scenario. You've outlined for me what UPenn's looking for, right? And you have certain questions. And I know my background, and so I get on my computer and I type this all in and I stick it in this.
Artificial intelligence.
And now you've got to read it. And you've got to figure out what? Everything. You've got to figure, because I know that's happened. I can guarantee out of 65,000, there's one person who just went,
Artificial intelligence. Artificial intelligence.
Just plugged it in, right? And said, I want to get into UPenn. Here's Whitney's background. Here's her link. Here's, so I can get a sense of her, I'm going to put in a prompt that says, write me responses to these questions to give me the best chance to become accepted. How are you dealing with this bubble around you right now?
Attention.
Registration is now open for the Middle States Commission on Higher Education 2024 Annual Conference, Protecting the Future, Champions for Higher Education, December 11th through 13, 2024 in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. Don't miss out. Register today at msche.org/annual-conference. We'll see you there. Calling all higher ed marketing and enrollment management professionals. Hear, hear. The Insights EDU conference is back. This is your chance to level up your marketing and enrollment management strategies, and the EdUp Experience podcast will be there once again. Join us at the Ritz-Carlton, New Orleans, February 12th through 14th for an unforgettable conference. Registration is now open with early bird pricing.
Outstanding.
Hey everybody, this is Elvin Freitas, co-founder of the EdUp Experience. Are you enjoying the conversation so far? Good, I hope so. Did you know that you can actually hear this conversation early before anybody else and ad-free, so you don't have to hear my voice during these ads? And did you also know that you could get extended episodes, bonus episodes, original content? That's right, original content and invites to special events, all while helping to sustain EdUp? Well, if you didn't know, now you know. So go to edupexperience.com, that's EDUP experience.com, and become a subscriber today. First, you got to sign up to our free email newsletter, and then you'll find out how to become a subscriber. Again, go to edupexperience.com.
It is an added layer of complexity in the work that we do, for sure. And I'm 100% confident that there is AI all throughout our applicant pool, not necessarily in every application, but that it's used and pervasive. And when, I recall 2 Decembers ago when ChatGPT hit the
market. Yeah.
And, everybody wanted to know, what are you going to do about this in the next application cycle? And I'm glad you asked this, because the answer to your question is another way of talking about how we think about equity in this process. And so one thought is for us to open up an application in the Common App or in Coalition, let's say, for students to have access to those applications, they usually go live in August of the application season. So for us to be ready with a live application in August, we have to be finished deciding what we want in our application in June. And so as we were approaching that spring and finalizing our questions, one thought was to put a question that said, have you used AI in your application? Just because students write an attestation, there's an attestation that they have to sign off on that it's their own, like that the information is honestly presented in their own work. That's always been there in the application. So we were going to add this extra question around AI. And then one of my staff, I wish it had been my idea, but it was not, which is why this is a great example of collaboration. So another very smart person in our office said, well, AI is free. And so finally, there's a tool where a student with very little resource has access to something that can help them polish off their writing.
A very interesting way to look at it. Mm-hmm.
And how many applicants do we already read whose parents and have helped them think through their essay?
AI, parents, the old AI.
Right. Or, are in schools maybe where they work on their application essays as part of their English class. And so they're getting support in school, but not every school does that. So, when we sort of zoomed out a little bit, we were thinking, well, there's already so much intervention, then it's not all bad, right? It's supportive and it's advice and helps students craft their best application. And it's not equitably distributed. And now there's a free tool. So do we really want to call out this? And so then it was like, okay, well, should we ask, have you had help in putting your application together and make it more broad? And that would sort of capture all the interventions that are out there. And then we thought, well, geez, if we do that, then what's the next question? How much on which thing? Who was it? I'm like, I don't want to go down that rabbit hole with 65,000 kids. And it's just going to make everybody nervous. And it doesn't get us really what we want to know, which is this your work? And it looped us back to what the attestation said in the first place, which is the application I'm presenting is an honest representation of my work and my experiences, and they have to sign it. And so we accepted that as comprehensive enough to address just AI becoming another thing that was in the application that we knew could be abused in how a student presented themselves, or could be used as a tool. And, I think we read things last year that looked like there was a lot of AI in it. And then we probably read things where there was AI support that was so well done that it was impossible to detect. And the same is true for students who get advice from other people on how to polish off their writing.
That's a fact. That's a fact.
By the way, there's always been people you could hire to write stuff. If you really want to go hire somebody to write something for you and submit it, I mean, think about, I said the other day, I'm like, I wish AI was around when I was writing my dissertation, because I would have used just to gather research, which was the part, but there, write your dissertation, $10,000. We'll write it for you and you submit it as your own, and nobody will ever know. And it's like those things have been around forever. So how do you look? What is a comprehensive review really entail? What, are you looking for potential? Are you looking for, grit? How do you identify something like grit? I mean, I'm waiting for somebody with a crystal ball answer, because I think that is a determinant for retention down the line. It's a determinant for so many items that will hit this person, this child, young adult, as they go through finding themselves. But what does comprehensive really entail, and how do you exercise that same view across so many applications? It's got to get hard.
It is. So yes, we do look for evidence of a student's ability to commit, for persistence, for problem solving, and also curiosity and energy and things that they care about. I mean, that's a pretty tall order, right?
Yeah, for
around
sure.
a teenager, and also a limited amount of space with which to work. And, we can't ask them a million questions because the application becomes unwieldy for them to complete, and more than we can work with in the amount of time that we have. So it goes back to us having to ask questions in a way that the answers get us close to the kinds of things that we care about. And again, we have to think about the instructions that we provide our team when we're getting ready to evaluate from year to year. If the results we're getting from the questions that we ask and the way that we are discussing what we read is getting us close to what it is we care about. So as an example, an academic assessment is, I was going to say fairly straightforward, but maybe not, because that's also comprehensive. An academic assessment is looking at the high school where the student goes to school, what's the curriculum available there, what's the proportion of students who go on to higher ed from there, what's the grading scale there, and you sort of look at what was available to this student academically and in their sort of their education environment of that school. And then what did they take in that space and how well are they doing with it? And you're looking for evidence that they have mastered the content and skill that they need for the work they're going to encounter at the time they arrive at Penn. And so we want to make sure they're ready to take on what it is they intend to do. But you're also looking for a disposition toward learning, where a student is willing to take something that might challenge them because they see that that's valuable to them, and they're going to apply themselves to that challenge, either because they love the subject or because taking it at that level gets them closer to something else that they care about, and they're willing to take that on. And so that academic assessment is important, and it's fundamental. If we can't establish that, then it's not going to go that far. But most of our applicant pool are very strong students. So we sort of do that and acknowledge that the student is well prepared. And then we're talking about the person. And when we're talking about something like contribution, it's really important that our assessment of that is not around, again, something that is access to resource. It might be, it could be a student who is a national level debater or an elite athlete or, doing some other activity that's highly specialized, music, let's say. Those all require a degree of resource in support, transportation, participation, probably money in a lot of cases to be able to have access to those things and to be able to specialize. But contribution is also, and that's valuable, right? To see a student commit to something and persist with it for a long time. But we also have students who are going to work. They go to school and then they go to work. And that might not be specialized in any particular way, but that's also showing a commitment to a responsibility, having to report into a boss, having to be somewhere on time, earning money, probably doing a job that is not particularly interesting for a lot of high school students, but it is a means to something that matters to them. And it may be for them to earn money for something they care about. It may mean that they are earning money to contribute to their family. We are reading about students whose non-academic time is largely taking care of family members. And does that give the student a chance to specialize in a particular interest? Not necessarily, but it does demonstrate something about a commitment to a family unit and to other individuals and cooperation and collaboration and a leadership of responsibility that's really, really important. And so our job is to make sure that there isn't one container in which we can recognize what a contribution looks like. And instead, what are the many ways in many circumstances that students could demonstrate to us that they can commit to something that matters and persist with it. The other thing that I'll add is, one of the, in a conversation that we have around students when we're reading their applications is, what would they be like as a roommate, or would they be a good lab partner, or, would they speak up in class, or, all these different things. And one of the things that we realized is that we have designed an application to be incredibly self-centered, which makes sense, right? It's the student presenting themselves, answering questions that we're asking them. So the answers will be, I want to do this. I have done this. I aspire to do this. I want to go to your school because. And so we put them in this position of centering themselves. And yet we're also trying to imagine what they're going to be like in a community with other people. And so if we're going to spend time talking about that, we should give them a chance to show us, ask them something. Sure. And that's how our thank you note question came to be, where we included a prompt, 200 words, that basically asked students to write a thank you note to someone.
Amazing.
Yeah, it was amazing. And that we did it for the first time 2 cycles ago. And
so you could assess the selfless nature of the person, or their ability to show empathy, perhaps.
It was really intended to give the space for a student to show us that they could recognize and respond to positive influence from another person.
That's good. I like that. And
we designed the question in a way that nobody can get it wrong, because it isn't, the answers aren't intended to sort the applicant pool into more grateful people, less grateful people. You can't get it wrong. I mean, it's providing information with one example of how this particular student, this individual, was able to recognize and accept a positive influence from another. And it could be a stranger who held the door open when their hands were full, and how much they appreciated being seen and noticed, and somebody, in an instant just took care of them, and it was really easy. Or it could be something, long-term influence of somebody they love and care about in their family, or, has mentored them in some way. I mean, again, as many kids as there are in the applicant pool, that's how many different kinds of answers you get. But they're not whose answer is better. It's just insight into how this particular student can articulate a moment in which they recognized and responded to positive influence. And then, as a benefit, it was 65,000 thank you notes that made it out into the world. Well, now 130,000, because it's 2 years that's happened. But the intention was for something we care about, that we think about when we're reviewing students, and how do we make a space for them that isn't a competitive space. It's just information to help round out how we're seeing them. And to the point I was making earlier, I would hope that our decision to create that question and to keep it says something back out to students about what we value at Penn.
Pull back the rug or go under the hood for us a little bit here. 65,000 applicants don't always all come in at the same time, right? I mean, do they all come in at the same time, like
they
the same 2 day?
Close. So we have 2 rounds of admission. We have an early decision round, and that deadline is November 1st. And students who've applied in early decision hear back from us mid-December.
Okay.
And that's about 8,000, a little over 8,000 applications. And then the balance of the 65,000 come in.
Pretty big balance there, Whitney.
January 1st. And, in each of those deadlines, I've been working in college admissions for more than 30 years, and this part has not changed. You're going to get 75% of your applications within 48 hours of your deadline.
Wow.
Doesn't matter how much time they have. It's going to be it's deadline is when most of them are going to show up. But we get enough in advance that, we get going as soon as we can start reading. And, but we do have to move quickly. I mean,
tell me how does so 75% of what, 57,000, something like that. Does the other 25% of that 57,000, they're just not going to get as good of a chance because they came in late? Is that a determining factor?
Their chances are the same because we use
Okay.
the same reading process regardless of when the applications arrive.
So pull it back for us. So you've got now your 8,000 early decisions, and you've made a decision on some of these people, right? Maybe you have 500 that have gotten in out of that, or 200.
Right. So we have from that first pass, early decision for us is binding. So if we're admitting a student early decision, they're definitely coming, and that seat is gone.
Right.
So we know that this part of the class is settled. So we can either admit students in at early decision, in which case we know they're coming. We can defer them, meaning we didn't make a final decision. We're going to review them again in the regular round, or we may deny at the early decision time, and they're no longer in consideration, and they know that, and so they can,
right,
fully be in other applicant pools, not wondering what will happen at Penn. The approach to how we read is the same either way, either round, and it is we put two people together, and they are reviewing an application at the same time, same application. And one of the beautiful things about technology is that we're reading them on a computer, PDF renderings of the application materials. So you and I could be reading the same application, and you're going to start with one section of materials. I'm going to start with another. We're going to review them. We're going to explain what we read to each other as just a starting point to like anchor the other person of here's what I got out of my part. But we could each see the entire application, and together we go through an evaluative process that has a format to it. So it's not a free-for-all, and make a decision about what we think should happen next. And then it can move on to, another stage depending on how that paired review goes. And then it gets. So
you don't get let's go to the 57,000. You don't get, or do you have some trigger that says, okay, that 57,000 needs to come down to 15,000, and the rest?
I don't think so.
They're just out, right?
Well,
there's no trigger.
No, there isn't a trigger that can do anything en masse.
There's no main filter or something that says they got their name, spelled their name wrong or something.
We know how many. Ultimately, we can't admit more than about 3,400, 3,500 students, or we'll have too many in the class, going back to where our conversation started. So we know how few spots there are to offer admission, which will settle itself down into the 2,400. So we know how difficult it's going to be, but the applications don't come to us as readers, we're not picking them up in any sort of order of anything other than maybe geography. So you're not starting with can be considered the strongest and working.
Sure.
You're just
some criteria you've decided. Right.
Every application gets opened fresh, just like the one before it, just like the one 4 weeks ago. And you go at it the same way with the same questions in your mind and the same deliberate approach to making an assessment, and you move through that application, that one, and then it moves to its next place, and you pick up the next one and you do the same thing again. It's really important that process keeps its fidelity through all 65,000 applications, right? That we have to have a process that can work that way, so that if you're the last student whose application gets picked up to be read,
same chance.
You have the same chance. Exactly.
And that's important for public trust, I think, right? Because there's so many people that will just go, well, Whitney, my kid is interested in, and has a 3.7, and I bet you guys aren't going to open the application. So I told him or her to apply anyway, but you're saying, yes, we will open it. And we're going to look at beyond that 3.7. We're going to look at all the, whatever, I don't know all the criteria, but we're going to look at the whole person. And I think that's important to help restore the public trust, to know that everybody has an equal chance. And I'm hearing from you that there's a assessment of resources that have to equal out the consideration. Does this person have, if you're a pianist and you've been taken to practice every day by your parents for the last 18 years and you can play Beethoven versus this person who's scratched and scraped and clawed and gone to work every day and done so well. Very different journeys. How do we assess them on the same playing field? And the access to resources can determine that.
Right. And so what you want to make sure is that we are, as evaluators, able to appreciate the contribution of both of those students.
Right.
And that we have set up a system that is built to be able to do that. So and in talking about that, I mean, this goes back to where we started in the podcast, is the more clarity we can bring out into the world around this is how the process works. What it does, I hope, is bring confidence, to use your word, out into the public that this is a real evaluation. Even though it is a lot of applications in a short amount of time, we are really careful about how we approach this. And in doing that we are creating an invitation to bring the talent into our applicant pool so that we can review it. I mean, that's the point. And I want that invitation to be broad, because talent is everywhere. And it is not talent, the inherent talent, the initiative and curiosity and the willingness to persist through something that is challenging because you find it valuable, that shows up everywhere.
Yeah.
And so it's really important that we're clear about how we value it so that students don't discount their own value, assuming we wouldn't value it, and then they don't apply. My job is to make sure that talent does apply so that we get a chance to review it and think about it.
Yeah, you said there's about 3,600 accepted, and you yield out 2,400 or so. So what we will never see is the conversations that have to be the most fascinating of all, which is getting down from 4,000 to 3,600, or from 3,900 to 3,600, or right, those where you have somebody who's so, what was that one factor that put people over the top? I think that's for UPenn and for you to know, Whitney, as you look at each individual, and it's never you versus you, it's filling this seat and who was best to fill the seat, right?
Yeah, I mean, I love how you phrase that, because when the conversations that get us from the 65,000 down to the 3,500, when it would be much easier on all of us if we were admitting 60,000, because there's you can make the case for most of the applicant pool. And yet the responsibility that I have is to fill the seats in each of the 4 schools that accommodates the intention and aspiration and educational plan for each of those 4 schools this next year, 4 years from now, 10 years from now. And those seats are all empty at the start. There's 2,400 open seats, and filling the seats is choosing students who meet what the goals and aspirations are of each of those schools. And I also have the responsibility to get the number right. So that's what we have to attend to. The students want us to respond to what they have achieved and how hard they have worked and the alignment that they see between themselves and the university. And we do respond to that. But if my responsibility were to respond to that and the students, we'd have way too many students. My responsibility has to be among all of that talent, choosing the students that accommodate all of the aspirations of the university year over year and in the right number of seats. And so, trying to get, if you're at 3,600 kids who you think you might be able to admit, but it can only be 3,400 or we'll over enroll, those 200, that's a big, every one of those is a really hard decision not to take.
Well, you know what? Meditate, work out, go to the gym. You're going to do something to keep your mind fresh as you look at these students every year. You must gear up for this, right? In some way, to keep your mind fresh.
Well, I think that one of the things, I think there are a number of things that help us move through every cycle, which is what we're doing now in early fall is we are always in some version of recruitment because students are always exploring Penn. Right. And so there's never not a time when we recognize that we're being evaluated and we want to be presenting Penn in a way that is authentic. But there are this time of the year is when high school seniors typically are really bearing down on application deadlines. And so really finalizing what they're going to do. And this is when our staff is traveling and in a lot of places, helping get that message out. And I think that the inspiration to take on the challenge that we have in evaluation and selection is because, I mean, to be honest, reading the students is inspiring. I mean, it's just entirely humbling. And so it is a lot of work in a short amount of time, but we're also connecting to amazing young people in what they're sharing with us. And knowing that while it's limited, our class is limited relative to the talent in the pool, that the 2,400 students that we're going to bring into the university next fall, what they will be able to do with each other and within the university, it feels really good to us to be the pathway for that. And it is both arduous and joyful at the same time to be part of creating what these students will do next. I get the opportunity to greet them when they first arrive, and it's ceremonial and it's really fun. And I get to make remarks in greeting them into the class and community of Penn as they launch. And then I get to see them at graduation, and it is really powerful. Yes, it is. It's why we do what we do. Right. It's why you do what you do, Whitney. And I know we have a hard stop for you, so we got to get you out of here. But I want to just tell you that, and thank you for giving us that really honest look at a big process for kids with big dreams and, big aspirations, really helping to craft the future of our society, right? I mean, that's what we do in higher education. We're so glad to have your insight here, ladies and gentlemen. Her name is Whitney Soule. She is the Vice Provost and Dean of Admissions at the University of Pennsylvania. Whitney, we hope you had fun here telling us all about your job too. I had a great time. I mean, as I said before, I have a great job. So if somebody wants me to talk about it, I can take up the time. I really enjoy the work that we do, and meeting young people at this point in their lives when they're thinking about what they might do next and being part of that with them has been a great career for sure. Ladies and gentlemen, you've just upped. Attention. Registration is now open for the Middle States Commission on Higher Education 2024 Annual Conference, Protecting the Future, Champions for Higher Education, December 11th through 13th, 2024 in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. Don't miss out. Register today at msche.org/annual-conference or head to msche.org and click on the conference link. I'll see you there. Higher education is evolving, and if you're in marketing and enrollment management, then you need to be at the Insights EDU conference.
That's a fact. That's a fact.
Insights EDU 2025 is happening February 12 through 14 in New Orleans, Louisiana. This is your chance to explore the latest trends in higher education and discover new and innovative strategies to level up your program marketing and enrollment. Hear from some of the best speakers in the industry, from companies like Google, LinkedIn, Adobe, and more. Registration is now open, so secure your spot while early bird pricing is still available.
Hey everybody, this is Elvin Freitas, co-founder of the EdUp Experience. Did you enjoy that conversation? I hope you did. Did you know that you can actually hear this conversation early on and ad-free? And you can also hear extended episodes, bonus episodes, original content. That's right, original content, and invites to special events, all while helping to sustain EdUp. Did you know that? Well, if you didn't know, now you know. To become a subscriber, go to edupexperience.com. That's EDUP experience.com to subscribe to our free email newsletter to learn how you can get access. Again, that's edupexperience.com. edup.com. That's EDUP experience.com.